I truly think that people forgot about Justin Herbert, but it's understandable because of the crazy playoffs that we just had. We just saw Joe Burrow, the number one overall pick just 2 years ago, take his team to the Super Bowl in his second season. Then we saw Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes have another epic matchup in the playoffs, and people are labeling that quarterback matchup Brady versus Manning 2.0. Then there's Justin Herbert, who just finished his second season and unfortunately didn't make the playoffs, and it came right down to the wire, and they lost on a field goal that kicked them out of the playoffs as time expired in overtime. But let's not forget that Justin Herbert, through 2 years of his career, has had maybe one of the greatest starts to an NFL career we've ever seen from a quarterback. But your legacy is always going to be tied to your playoff success and your postseason wins and everything that goes along with what you do post regular season. And Justin Herbert has yet to get there. And it's understandable because he's in a situation that, isn't setting him up for success like some of these other quarterbacks we just talked about. Joe Burrow, he had a coach that was already in the NFL. Yeah, it might have only been for one season, but Joe Burrow walked into a situation where he had an experienced coach. Patrick Mahomes walked into a situation where his coach has pretty much been a head coach in the NFL as long as Patrick Mahomes has been alive. And then Josh Allen, he walks into a situation where his coach has been a head coach for a few years already and is going into an experienced coach. Justin Herbert, drafted 6th overall by the Los Angeles Chargers, goes into a situation with Anthony Lynn as his head coach, and people didn't really say that Anthony Lynn was a bad coach. But after last season, we saw some of the time management issues and other things that just seemed that they weren't going to be able to, Anthony Lynn just didn't seem like he was going to be the future there. And the Chargers decided to move on after one season with Justin Herbert. So Justin Herbert going into his second season this past season, he is a rookie head coach, right? They opted to go with a young coach that, they think has a ton of upside and is going to help Justin Herbert develop. But this was his head coach's first season, Brandon Staley's first season. And we saw Brandon Staley, have, some issues, right? He's the person that depends on a lot of analytical things, stats and stuff to make decisions on fourth down, right? They were the team that went for fourth down almost every time they were on fourth down. It was honestly crazy. And that actually costed them in the Raiders game, right? If they don't go for it on fourth down, their own territory, and, set up the Raiders in field goal position, there's a chance that the Raiders don't score on that possession. And instead, the Chargers just win at the end of regulation and there's no overtime, right? These are all ifs, whens, and buts and stuff like that. So, but just looking towards the future, Justin Herbert and Brandon Staley, for that fact, are both going to be going into their next season with more experience. And the Chargers are set up in a really good situation. $72 million in cap, the second most in the NFL. You could really do a lot with that kind of money, whether you want to save it to sign some of your players in the future and stuff like that, or you opt to spend a bunch of it in free agency right now and try to be a win-now team. This is similar to what the Bengals did, right? The last 2 years, they completely revamped their defense. There was the graphic during the Super Bowl that showed that 8 of the 11 starters on the Bengals team were on different teams 2 years ago. So you could opt to go that way. The Chargers are also have a ton of young talent. They're in a much better situation than the Bengals were 2 years ago. But looking at the free agency list that the Chargers have, the biggest person I think they need to sign back is Mike Williams, right? A young quarterback, you always want to surround him with a ton of weapons, and Mike Williams has an insane NFL body. He's just a really big receiver who's incredibly fast and agile for his size and stuff like that. And he already has chemistry with Justin Herbert. So he's a player that you must sign if you want, to see Justin Herbert continue to flourish. The only other they have a ton of free agents. However, the only other big one I see that they really need to sign besides their kicker, right? I think they'll sign their kicker back. I feel like kickers are free agent every year, to be honest. But the only one I see that they need to sign back is Chris Harris Jr. And, that's just due to the fact that the Chargers cornerback spot might be their weakest point. We did see, Asante Samuel Jr., the rookie, he was probably the best cornerback for the Chargers. So that's a ton of upside right there. However, after him, and he had some injury issues. I think after him, the cornerback position really falls off. So I think you have to sign Chris Harris Jr. back just to, give some stability to that position and try to, add some depth there and stuff like that. Because I think that might be your biggest issue. But let's look at the Chargers offseason, right? $72 million in cap space. They're going to have some draft picks and stuff like that, obviously. But the biggest things I think they need to focus on this offseason is cornerback, number one, just because it's so weak. And there's a ton of cornerback talent in this draft that you could opt. The other big thing is the right side of that offensive line. Brian Beluga, who, is their right tackle right now, he is a really solid starter in the NFL, and he stays around. He will be a good starter, and he will be there next year. there's just a lot of questions that I've seen lately about him coming back as a long-term starter. Just because of the injuries that he's had, is he going to just opt to retire early because of the injuries and stuff like that? So that's going to be a question that they're going to have to solve this offseason. If he's back, then that is a huge, huge upgrade. Well, not even an upgrade because they already have him, but like a huge news for the Chargers. So they're going to have to figure out that situation. Their right guard spot is probably, a little bit, that's where they really need to upgrade. So we'll probably see that. So I think the right side of the offensive line, they're going to have to take a look at. They need to upgrade the cornerback position, whether it's getting a quality starter, a young player in the draft, or even just adding some depth to try to back up Asante Samuel Jr. and Chris Harris Jr. That's what they really need to do. And then I think they need another edge, because we've seen edges just get double teamed and they're shut out. And Joey Bosa is one of the best edge rushers we've had, but he's not getting, as much hype as TJ Watt is, or as much hype as his own brother, Nick Bosa, and the 49ers is getting. I think they need to add another edge rusher, or at least build that defensive lineup a little bit more to take some of the pressure away from Joey Bosa and allow him to really flourish. Those are the biggest things I think the Chargers need to do. And with, everything that they have, all the assets that they have, the cap space that they have, they're going to have some good picks in this upcoming draft because they didn't make the playoffs. They're going to be a team that's set up for success. And Justin Herbert, one of the most talented young quarterbacks we've ever seen in the NFL, it's going to be a big third season for him, right? This is when people are kind of going to expect him to make a postseason in general, right? I was going to say a postseason run, but he just needs to make the postseason first. I'm excited to see. I'm a really big fan of Justin Herbert. I think he has a ton of talent. He seems to process the game really well at a young age, which sometimes we don't see. I remember Patrick Mahomes a few years ago saying like it was his, in his third season, his second year starting, and he's like, I'm just learning how to read an NFL defense, and that was crazy to think about because he was already putting up insane numbers and went to an AFC championship at that point. So the fact that Justin Herbert seems to understand the game and stuff like that is huge upside for the Los Angeles Chargers. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let me know what you think the Chargers need to add, and do you think they have a chance to maybe pull off a Bengals miracle run next year with their quarterback and Brandon Staley being his second year as head coach, or do you think they're just going to be just a team that makes the playoffs, or do you think they're going to miss the playoffs in general? Let me know in the comments below, guys. If you liked the video, please make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And that's it.